The Yorubas of Nigeria have a saying. They will say, Eti tó bá gbọ́ àlọ́, ó gbọ́dọ̀ gbọ́ àbọ̀. I will translate to you. The ear that is, the true journey must hear the fro journey. So yes, we are back. We are back from the negotiations room of the Americans and the Iranians in Islamabad, Pakistan. And I'm sorry and not sorry to inform you that the negotiations failed, as I totally expected. How did it go? Let me explain the blow by blow, um, uh, narrative. About 24 hours ago, there was actually a security scare that if the Iranians took off from Iran, with the planes and all, it has to be civilian planes. They can't take fighter jets anyways because it's a civilian delegation in suits and shirts that the Israelis can actually go kaboom and decide to take them down with their fighter jets. Because of that, the Pakistanis actually sent the fighter jets and the AWACS planes to Bandar Abbas, the port city, along the axis of the Strait of Hormuz, to try to escort the Iranian delegation to Islamabad. Eventually, the Iranians took off and landed safely. That took care of that. The American delegation also took off from America, led by President J.D. Vance. An unusual scenario. It was always led by Witkoff and Jared Kushner. You remember? Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. This time around, President Trump put the Vice President J.D. Vance on the top of the delegation. While on the Iranian side, it was a Speaker of Parliament, Golibov. Remember them? Arakchi, the foreign minister, and the new replacement for what's his name? From Ali Larijani, the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, and the foreign minister, the deputy foreign minister to Arakchi. Those were the leaders of the Iranian delegation. Coincidentally, all the 4 top leaders of the Iranian delegations happen to be PhDs. That is another story for another day. Another interesting dimension you may need to know is that it was Speaker of Parliament Dr. Golibov that actually flew the Airbus 321 plane that brought the Iranian delegation into Islamabad in Pakistan. It will surprise you, right? However, apart from being the PhD and being the sitting speaker of the Iranian parliament, Speaker Golibov is also a licensed fighter jet pilot and the former head of the Iranian Air Force. In fact, he is also a licensed A321 Airbus commercial pilot. And this is not the first time he will pilot a massive commercial plane himself into, a country. He did so in 2024 when he went to visit the Lebanese in Beirut, back then in Lebanon. He did it this time around too in to Islamabad in Pakistan. Another important dimension you should know that is that Iran came with 3 planes and not 1. So one of the planes actually contained the bloodied school bags of the girl child victims, all 168 of them of the Minab school, unalivings. You remember Minab? The school children, the 168/170 school girl children that were unalived on the very first day of the war on February 28th. As they were taking out the supreme leader, and his family in his residence, they also did that attack in Minab that killed 170, girl school children. Their bloodied school bags were actually brought on the planes. One school bag per seat. Tucked into the school bag was the picture of each schoolgirl to commemorate those school children and to put them at the top of the agenda. At about the time that the Iranians were coming in, there was still some brickbats to, America acceding to the Iranians' request, particularly for a ceasefire in Lebanon, 2, for the release of some of the financial assets of the Iranians, at least to start with, some $7 billion that was stuck in the hand of the Qataris, that the South Koreans paid to the Iranians, but that the Americans got stuck in the Qatari banks, among the hundreds of billions of dollars of assets that Iran has in the hands of the United States of America, among other issues. But they landed anyway still, and then they went into negotiations. They went into negotiations for 21 hours, from morning till well into midnight. In the middle of negotiations, the United States of America yesterday actually tried to pull a geopolitical military stunt on the Strait of Hormuz. They tried to move two destroyers, two American, warships, destroyers this time around, across the Strait of Hormuz. While the American, media was insisting that not just did the destroyers go through the Strait of Hormuz successfully, that they have also started a process of demining, and as a result opening up, and as a result taking charge of the Strait of Hormuz from the Iranians. The Iranians retaliated. That what actually happened was, the moment those destroyers took off, the Iranian military guys on the Strait of Hormuz actually made a call to the Iranian negotiators who were back then in Islamabad, as in Islamabad, Pakistan, who informed the Pakistani interlocutors, who in turn informed the Americans that if they do not return their ships back to base, if it does not stop continuing to move through the Strait of Hormuz, that the Iranians will fire at those American destroyers in 30 minutes. Some reports say in 15 minutes. According to the Iranians, in fact, they had actually mobilized drones that were going to do the firing, and the drones were already mid-air, but the Americans let a good reason prevail, and the destroyers went back to the UAE bases that they took off from, and the Iranians went back to taking full control and full sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. So that was about the little skirmish that happened mid-negotiations yesterday. On the Israeli front, Iran kept pressuring and pressuring that Israel must declare ceasefire in Lebanon before they can go on to do negotiations with the Americans. What eventually gave was that Israel conceded and actually stopped attacking mainstream Beirut and the Dahir area in Beirut, southern Beirut, the capital city. That actually stopped, and I confirmed that. However, they insisted that they were not going to stop attacks on southern Lebanon, which is that territory of Lebanon that abuts northern Israel. So all through the negotiations and even to the present time, there have been military scuffles, from one side to the other between the Lebanese resistance and Israel on the other side. Israel is firing, missiles with fighter jets and drones and things like that into southern Lebanon, while the Lebanese resistance is firing the missiles, the Scud missiles, the drones and things like that back into northern Israel and other parts of Israel. So that is a status quo as at that material time. Again, in the middle of negotiations, President Trump continues to do his Truth Social posts. He kept insisting about things that were not happening on the Strait of Hormuz, again, to manipulate and model the global oil markets to bring things down. They did not work particularly well. However, in another tweet, President Trump insisted that the United States can actually replace the Persian Gulf in terms of the volume of output, that essentially all countries of the world should forget about the Arabs and the Persian Gulf and should come to America to come and buy as many, barrels of crude oil as they so wish. I personally doubt the capacity of continental America to fulfill that, that massive gap, because the US may be actually churning out a lot of crude oil, but I don't think it can satisfy the close to 100 million barrels of oil, or even a quarter of that, on a daily basis that the world needs. That is why that 20 million barrels, of oil that is coming out of the Persian Gulf continues to remain extra critical, to the economic maintenance of the world. So after negotiations, what happened? Everybody went back home. I was totally expecting that probably the Americans will have returned to start attacking, Iran, or even send the Israelis to do an attack on Iran to essentially lock out all of the ceasefire, and then resume the war. But as of this material time, it has not happened. Everybody is looking at Israel options, and at this time, Iran is still at a slightly higher geopolitical notch concerning this crisis, compared to the United States of America and Israel, largely and principally because of its maintained control of the Strait of Hormuz. That is where we are as at this material time. As updates unfold, I will be coming back here to do episodes to explain the meaning of things to you. Again, thank you for joining me on this episode. Don't forget to like, to share, to broadcast, to subscribe, and to toggle the notification button to continue to have access to our videos. Thank you very much. Have a very good day.